Hey, how's it going, folks? This is Hellbent, and welcome to this tutorial on getting the position of one of your controls. So the position of your control is its X position within the client area of your GUI, the Y position within the client area of your GUI, and its width and height. I'm going to create my own scenario of why I'm going to be creating this, and you're going to have to, my scenario isn't going to be yours, so you just have to interpret what I do here and apply it to whatever you want to do. So recently somebody had asked a question about resizing a text control so that way it starts off with, let's say, a short string of text, and then later on that more text has to be added to it. Now, I'm going to show you how you can do it, and then I'm going to explain why it's not really the right approach, and I'll show you what probably is the right approach, maybe, and then I'll show you a scenario where this is the good approach. So let's say if I have some text, let's just build up a GUI first, and then we can discuss what's going on. So I'm going to create a GUI. I'm going to set it to name of 1, and I'm going to set it to always on top. So all I have on the screen so far is just single instance force, return to exit out of my auto execute area, and then GUI close and a hotkey to exit out of the script. Everything else we're going to be coding through this. So always on top, and I'm going to set the background color to be I don't know. I'll make it I'll make it black. I'll set some font. I'll set it to have a color of white and a size of 12. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a GUI a text control. GUI add, and I'm going to position it X10, Y10, width of 280, and I'll leave it to size its height on its own. And we have some text. And I'll just show the GUI, and I'll give it a width of 300 and a height of 300, just so it's big enough so that we can all see it. So here we go. We have a GUI. All it has is a text control on it that has some text that says this is some text. Okay. Now let's say that what I want to have happen is that if as my program's running, it encounters some condition and it's supposed to update the text. Or if I click on this control and I want it to update with some new text. Or if I press a hotkey and I want it to update with some new text. Now, like I said, the scenario I'm going to be painting here isn't a good use of this. The explanation is, let's say if I have other buttons or other checkboxes or etc., etc. When I created my GUI, all those other controls, their position is based on the positions of other controls. So if I go in now and if I start changing the size of these controls, other controls are going to get overlapped. There's a whole bunch of issues that, you know, I just don't really want to deal with. But let's say that there is some scenario where it's okay for me to resize this control. So that's what we're going to be working with. The assumption that it is okay for me to resize this control, but I do have some things that I want to remain constant. So for example, I want it to always start at X10, I always want it to start at Y10, I always want it to have a width of 280, but the height, I want it to be dynamic and adjust as needed. So to help visualize a little bit better on what the actual dimensions of our current text control is, I'm just going to add a border. So this is just going to add a thin border around our text control. Okay, so this is the current allocated height and width for our text control. What I'm going to do in here is I'm going to, we don't actually, technically we don't have to specify a variable for this, but we'll do it because it's a lot clearer on what's going on if I do. So I'm going to attach a variable. I'm going to call it text1. So this control is called text1 now, and I'm going to attach this to a label. So what I'm going to do is, if I click on this, it's going to execute a subroutine, and that's going to change the text. So we're going to go to update. So now I need to come down here and create that label. What are we going to do when we execute this? We want to update with some new text. So there could be, like I said, there could be multiple different things that are being updated. I don't know. Maybe it's some value that it's gotten through the process of running the script, and then we're going to display that. But for our simple example, we're gonna hard code. We're gonna create a variable that contains what the new text is going to be. So I'm going to call this var1, whatever, var1. And I'm going to set it to equal, I don't know what happened there. Whatever. So we got some new text. It's obviously going to be longer than, presumably it's going to be longer. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now I know that this text here is definitely not going to fit within 280 pixels. So let's see what happens if we were to just, right now, try to change this text that we currently have with our new text that we want to be put into this control. To do that, we're just going to use GUI control. The window that we're using, no subcommand, and then which control we're going to be updating, text1. What are we going to be updating into it? We're going to be putting into it our var1, and that's it. So let's go ahead, run this, and now so now my scenario is I want to change the text that it currently is to the new text. But the problem is it doesn't know to resize it. It's actually a good thing that it doesn't resize it on its own. So when I click on this, most of our text from the new thing is going to get cut off because it doesn't know to resize our control. Okay, so how can we resize our control? We don't exactly know how much this is going to take up. We can guess, right? But we don't actually know how much space this is going to take up. So how can we do it to make it so that way inside of here we can change this? So we can, like I said, we can guess how much space this is going to use by using GUI control move and just guess what it's going to be. But instead, let's say we didn't know how much text this was going to be. Let's say this is some other generated text that's generated some other way. So we don't know how much space we're going to need. But we do know what the text is going to be inside of here. Once we launch this, we do know what that text is going to be. But before that, we don't know. So let's see how we can do that. The way we're going to do that in here is we're going to create a temporary window, a temporary GUI, and we're going to build it like as if we built this first GUI. Like in this first GUI, we didn't specify a height. Because our text was only one line, it automatically set it to be this height. So what we're going to do is in here, we're going to create a second GUI, but we're only going to create the elements of it that we actually need. So the two elements we need is one, the font that we're going to be using, because this size, this 12 size, isn't the default. So we definitely need the size, and also if we change the font to something else like different font types or whatever you call, whatever the name of this font types, whatever, they have their own spacing and everything like that. Like the height of the text is different for different font types. Like some of them, they're like, even though I'm using the same size, it's irrelevant. Some of them will be like half the page just for a size 12 with certain types of font. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that I'm going to get two things. I'm going to make sure I have the font and the text control. So I'm going to take, because I'm a slow typer, I'm just going to copy these and edit them. So inside of the update, I'm going to separate what's going to updating this control with what's from this new one that I'm creating. So I'm going to create, I only have one window. I'm only ever going to have one window. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this fake GUI. I'm just going to call it GUI2. And I'm going to set the font for that GUI to be the same as the original. Then I'm going to add a text control to the second GUI. And I want its X position to be the same, I want its Y position to be the same, I want its width to be the same, but its height is, I'm going to let it size itself. I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call this text2. We don't need to attach this, we don't need a border, because we're never going to see this. It's never going to get shown. And I don't need to attach this to a label, because we're never going to be executing this, because it's never going to get shown. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the new text that I want to display, which is contained in var1, but like I said, it could be some other way that I'm generating this text. So I'm going to display the new text that I want to have displayed in it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the GuiControlGet position subcommand in order to tell me how big this control is when I add it, because I've let it size its height on its own. So I'm going to allow it to create that control, let it size its height on its own, and now I'm going to get what that height was. And the way I'm going to do that is by typing out GuiControlGet. Now I need an output variable. I can call it Bob. And the next thing is the subcommand. The subcommand, the first thing that I need to give it is the name of the window that I'm going to be getting the control's position from. And that is, in our case, window 2. The subcommand I'm going to be using is position, or POS, and then what am I going to be getting the position of? I'm going to be getting the position of that text control that I want to get the position of, text 2. And that's it. Now, when I use this command position, what it does is it takes this variable that I've created, this Bob variable, and it creates 4 variables out of it. One variable will be called Bob X for the X position of my control, which in this case happened to have been 10. So Bob X will end up having a value of 10 in it. Then it also creates Bob Y for the Y position. Bob Y is going to have 10. Bob W is going to have the 280 because we've specified there. The one that we actually only need in this case is the Bob H for the height, because the height is something we don't know because we're letting it size itself. So Bob H is what we're going to use. So now that we have this Bob H variable, what I can do is I can take this control here and I can resize it to be the same size as this temporary window here. Now that I have all that information, what I'm going to do is, because we might want to switch out this multiple times, I'm going to destroy this temporary window. So this window never got shown. All we did was we created it just to add a fake text control to it that was able to get a height dimension for us to be able to use now to update our original control. So to do that, inside of here now, I'm going to do GUI control, and the window I'm going to be doing is just window 1, and we're going to be moving. What are we going to be moving? We're going to be moving our text 1 control. Where are we going to be moving it? Its X position is going to be the same, its Y position is going to be the same, its width is going to be the same. The only thing that's going to be potentially different, because it might be actually the same, is the height. So I'm just going to put height, and then inside of percent marks I'm going to use Bob H for the height variable. Now it's been updated. Now what we can do is we can update it with that the same text that we're putting in here. So the same text we put into our fake control, now our real control has been resized to accommodate that new text, and now we can add that new text to our control. So here we go. Before, without us doing this, when we clicked on it, it added the text, but the size of it all stayed the same. Now it's going to expand it out. And there we go. That's how you do it. Okay. So that's simplified. That's this way we can do it. Now the better way, if we actually know when we start our program that this text here is actually going to be the longest text that we're going to have, and this is the text that we want to have to start with, then what we should do instead is, instead of doing all this stuff here, what we should do is, make sure you have all this, I'm going to get rid of it. All we're going to do is, in the update, when I click on it, all we're going to do is when we click on it, so right now if I click on it, it's not going to readjust it. It's still going to do just that, but up in here when we created the control, instead of us putting this is some text, what we're going to do is we're going to put the longest thing that's ever going to be in that, which is var1. So now when it builds this control, it's going to build it with that height for this text here, and then as soon as it's done building it, we're going to, before the GUI even ever gets shown, we're going to I don't remember. I'm trying to think of what was the text I had. This is some text. So now when we build our GUI, it's getting built with the longest. It's automatically getting built with the space that we need for our longest text. And then as soon as it's done building that, then we can just change it with the text that we want it to be to start with. And then so that way the only thing we see when we show it is going to be this text. And then when we click on it, it'll go into here and update. And it already has that space ready for it. Oops, this is supposed to be comma there. So as you can see, it's already allocated the space. So if we didn't have the border, we wouldn't know any difference. Right? And then when I click on this, because it already has that space allocated for our longest control, our longest string of text, it has no problem with filling it in. Okay, so that's that. The next thing we're going to do is we'll look at maybe the only time I've ever needed to adjust the text, which is typically if I have some scrolling text or something like that. So let's say if I have some text that's scrolling across the screen, but for whatever reason through the process of the scripts running, it might change. So that's going to take a little bit of setup, so let's do that. I can get rid of this. So like I said, there's going to be I need to do a little bit of setup for this. So before my return, I'm going to create a timer. And I'm going to add it to this label here, this update. So that way I don't have to create a new thing. Update, and I'm going to set it to 10 milliseconds. Okay, I can get rid of this. I can get rid of this label here. And this is going to be some text. What I'm going to do is I'm going to what I want is I want to have as little white space as possible. So if my text is really short, I don't want to have a huge amount of like I don't want to have 2,000 pixels for 4 words. So because what I'm going to do is as soon as it leaves the screen on one side, I'm going to make it pop up on the other side. So what I will do is I'm going to hard code this time that it's only going to be 1 row tall, but I'm going to use the get position to tell me how wide this is. I'm also going to need to have it, because we're going to be moving its X position, I'm going to create a variable that's called X. And up here, I'm going to set it to be I'll set it to be 300, the width of my window. You know what, I got a better idea. You can leave now if you want. You can leave now if you want, because I'm gonna do this. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to have the text on a child window, so a window that sits inside of the main window. So to do that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say GUI2, and its options are going to be plus parent. Parent is 1. I'm going to set its parent to be 1, and I'm going to remove the caption, all the border around it. Minus caption. Then with that, I'm going to give it a color, a different color, so that way it stands out from the main background. So I'm going to do, let's see, I'm going to do the main background a little bit of a grayish color, because I know that sometimes things are going to be a little bit hard for you to see because the resolution isn't that great. So what I'll do is I'll set that one to be the first GUI to be a little bit, not quite black, slightly grayish color, and then I'll set GUI2 to be black. With the parent thing, as far I have encountered only one person that had an issue with the parent thing. So if you have an issue, I looked it up. I believe it has to do with the version of AutoHotkey that you have, not anything else. So I mean, it could be the version of Windows that you have, but more often than not, it's probably going to be that you just have a really old version of AutoHotkey and you just need to get a new updated version of AutoHotkey, because otherwise it's not going to recognize this parent thing. I could just do owner. That's normally what I would do. I'd set it to be the owner, and then I'd have to do some playing around with when I move this window, this window get its position and moves it, blah blah blah. That's too much work. I'm just going to set it as a child, and I'll set this one to be black. So the background of the second window is going to be black. The second window, I'm going to have it. The X position and Y position of this is going to be relative to the client area of the parent window. So I'm going to set this to be X10, Y10, and I'm going to give it a width of 280. Oops, why did I do that? Width of 280, and I'm going to set it to 1 row. Can I set it to... I don't know if I can set it to row 1. I'll let it auto size itself, because I'm going to be adding a text control to it, so I know it's going to automatically... I don't know. No, I would need it to be... I can put... Okay, I'm just gonna hard code something, and if I want it to, I could play around with it afterwards. I don't usually use margin, so maybe I'll try using margin. This is why you don't film when you don't have a plan. Now with margin, do I just type out it's what I want it to be? I'll try 0, 0. I'm not sure if I need to specify X and Y, but I'll just try using that. Set the margin. This, I'm going to take that text control that's on GUI1 and I'm going to put it into GUI2. I'm going to position it at x is going to equal the width of that second window, so 280. 280. So the text is going to be positioned at 280, or right at the right edge of the screen, so all of the text is going to be off the screen to begin with. The y I'm going to set to 0 because it's just within this window here, not within this window here, so I'm going to set its y to be 0. I'll set it to 1 row. Text 1, yeah, no problem, no problem. Okay, in the update, what I should do is just get some testing going to see where I'm at. So what this is the update is the timed event, so every 10 milliseconds it's going to run through this. All it's going to do in here is going to check to see if when I subtract 1 from x, if it is less than the width of my control, if it's less than the width of my control, so now I need to get the width of my control. So in here, after I create my control, I'm going to do GuiControlGet. And I'm just going to call it, last time I called it Bob, this time I'm going to call it position. And it's window number 2, the subcommand is position, the name of the control is text 1, and there we go. If when I subtract 1 from x, if it's less than negative POSW. So when I get the width, let's say it's 100 pixels wide, that POSW has a value of 100. So what I'm doing here is I'm subtracting each frame, I'm subtracting 1 from x, and if x is less than negative 100, then what it's going to do is it's going to change that to be x is equal to the width of my window. The width of my window, yes, yes, yes. No, 280, width 280. Because this is going to be a little window, a little tiny window that's sitting inside of the parent window. So when I'm done, when it moves the x all the way over, I'm going to reset it to be back on just the right hand side of where that window started. So it's like as if it's coming back in. Now what we're going to be doing after with that POSW is the reason why we need, another reason why we need this is because if we make that text really, really long, we're still going to be afterwards moving it back to be right at the right side of the window. But for the when it's moving off to the left, we want it to move all the way off to the left, so that way all of our text, so if this text gets longer, it keeps going to the left until that text is all been shown. And once we've done, so if it's less, so we're going to subtract 1 from the position of x. If that position happens to be the negative width, then reset it. Either way, we're going to update the GUI by moving it. GUI control 2, move. What are we going to be moving? We're going to be moving text 1. Where are we going to be moving it? We're only going to be moving the x-axis, so x, x. Knock on wood, everything should work okay. Knock on wood. Oh, I forgot to reset the font. So before I do that, let me GUI, because the font right now is black, so we don't even know if anything's working. So GUI 2, font, C white, size, let's go 16. Okay, there we go. So now, once this text gets just past the T, it should respawn it over there. And there we go. So what happens, what if we want to, through the process of updating our program, that we want it to update it? So what would happen without us being able to know how to resize it? is, I'll create a hotkey, number pad 1. I'm going to create new text. I'll name it the same as I had it before, var1 equals okay, so I've just created some new text. Let's see what happens if I press number pad 1 and we just try to update that. Of course you already know what's going to happen. Of course you already know what's going to happen. It's not going to show it. So I hit number pad 1. It changes it and it just says this is thumb, because it's still using the same width that it got for when it created our control. So what we need to do before we show our text, we need to, once again, we're just going to create that second fake GUI. So we're going to do GUI 3, because it's a GUI that we're not using. GUI 3. Once again, we need to make sure that it has the same font. And we need to have a text control. So this is GUI 3, add a text control, position it. It doesn't really matter where I position it. The X isn't this, the X, the Y, this, they don't matter if they change. What I really need is the width. So let's, I'm going to call this, give it a temporary name. I'll just call it temp text. And what are we going to be putting into it? We're going to be putting whatever's in var1. So this is what we want to now have up in there. Once we're done that, we can get the position of that new fake control. By using GuiControlGet, I'm going to call this POS, and it's window 3. The subcommand is position. Which control are we going to be doing? Temp text. Now that I have the position, I can destroy that GUI. And I can resize the text control. I can resize this text control. Which is window 2. The subcommand is move. What are we going to be moving? The text 1 control. What are we going to be moving along it? We're only going to be changing its width. So its width is going to be POSW. And then, now that it's been resized, I can show it with the new updated value. Okay, so this is my beginning text, this is some text. Before, last time when I pressed number pad 1, it added the new text, but it didn't have enough space for it all, so most of it got cut off. So this time, now, and because I have it set up here to be, yes, this should still work, because, yeah, I was worried. Okay, one of the potential problems was if this was done inside of a function. See how I've created this variable here, POS, and it ends up being POSW. If these two didn't happen to line up, then I could have some problems. So let's just in case you end up not understanding something there, what I'm going to do is, as soon as I've gotten, so when I create the GUI the first time, I've gotten the position, the width of that text control, and then I'm saying in here each time it scrolls, if the width ends up being, so if the width is only from here to here, then as soon as that text gets to this point, jump it back over to there. But if the width is here, wait till the text gets to here, then jump it. Right? So no matter what the width is, it's always just going to move it further and further off to the left. there could be cases where this, what I've done here, isn't going to work out the way you want. So as soon as I created the control the first time and I've gotten its position, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this variable that we have now, Pos To, and I'm going to put this into a more permanent thing. Let's call it the width, and that is equal to Pos To. Okay, and instead of here of checking to see if it's gone over to the negative Pos To, we're going to do this. I'm going to make global as well, so that way even if it's functions that are doing this, it'll be able to see it no problem, or I'll be able to update the value of it no problem. So I'm going to set that as global, and instead of looking at Pos To, I'm going to be looking at the width. Here, when I've gotten this control here, the width for this, instead of keeping it in that temporary variable there, I'm going to change what the width now equals. So the width doesn't equal what it equaled before, it now equals whatever the new value of Pos To is. And then I'm not going to show it this at I'm not going to show it at change the width to Pos To. I mean, I could in this case. It's not going to. This is fine, perfect. It's going to work exactly. There's never going to be a scenario where it's not going to work in this particular case. But I'm going to, just to keep things consistent, I'm going to change this to be the width. And there we go. So if you're not clear on this, okay, once again I'll go over this X position. This X position of where it's changing it once it gets off the screen is the size of this black area. So that at the right edge of this black area is X to 80. Right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this again, and everything should work the same way as it did before. So this is some text. If I hit number pad 1, this is some random text, some random new text, blah, blah, blah. And it's going to wait until it gets all the way off the screen and then jump it back over. Perfect. Okay, let's do one more thing. So we've changed it from being a short string to a long string. Now let's change it the reverse. Let's do the reverse. So I'm going to duplicate this, change this to be var2, and I'm just going to do this is the end. Okay, so I have a new variable. This is the end. I'm going to duplicate all of this stuff here, and I'm going to change this to be number pad 2. And instead of creating a fake control that has var1, in this case I'm going to do var2. We're going to get the position of that, destroy that, update that with the new width, and then we're going to update it with the new updated variable too. The starter text. The second text. And then the next one. And then back, and so on. Okay, so that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. And I'll see you guys on the next one. But before I go, thank you to the sponsors that covered the cost of a couple of cups of coffee. Thank you. I'll make sure to leave your names in the description. And really thank you. It took some of the burden of the cash cost off of me. So much appreciated. Anyways, peace. See you guys on the next one.